What? There it is. What is going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages? This is part 2 of CSG. What's going on, guys? So if you did not catch the first episode, first of all, shame on you. You need to confess that sin and make sure to check out every other episode from now on, every Friday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. Mark it in your calendar, kqqradio.com. That's the place to be at 7 o'clock Eastern every Friday night. Check it out. Tell your friends. Share it to the world. And let's go, right? Creation ex Nihilo. That's what we were talking about earlier. David wanted to talk about that. And so we got into a conversation that absolutely required a second part, right? We had to do it, and we decided to do it. Now, with me, I have Joshua Sherman from Tending Our Nets, Andrew Elliott from Andrew Does Apologetics, and David Russell himself from Pora. Guys, thank you so much for being with me for a part 2 of this. And just so, Andrew, I will start with you actually this time. Just for the people who didn't catch the first episode, you are a TikTok star, millions of followers, thousands of comments every single day, making billions of dollars. No, Andrew Does Apologetics is the TikTok place to go. Andrew, introduce yourself and tell people about your, what do they call it on TikTok? Channel?
Your page.
Your page.
Yeah.
Tell people about your TikTok page, brother.
Careful there, Tyler.
Absolutely.
You're starting to sound like an old man.
Oh, no.
Oh. I can see it. I'm the oldest one here.
I'm gonna 40 what?
41.
I was gonna say you're starting to sound like a prosperity preacher. The way you gave me those, the way you introduced me just now.
Man,
I wish I had millions of followers. I mean, TikTok might actually have good theology then.
get some more faith.
Name it and claim it, brother. Name it and claim it.
Right. Blab it and grab it. But no, my name's Andrew Elliott. I'm 29 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina with a beautiful wife and daughter, Diana and Ada. I've been on TikTok for about a year. And, you know, I was talking about on the first episode, COVID has kind of put me out. Even just being home from the hospital and getting better from COVID, I just still haven't been in the right mental vein to start posting content again. But my major audience and apologetic on TikTok and now bleeding out into other venues, thankfully through friendships like David, really like to come against anti-Trinitarian heresies, things going on in the evangelical church today, like the word of faith, the prosperity gospel, those heresies, the new apostolic reformation that's slowly creeping into the church. Those are things that I really take strong passion against, because for 90% of my life, I was warped in most of those false teachings, and only by the grace of God, he pulled me out of that wide path to destruction. And he's still sanctifying me, right? Like every day is a journey of being able to possess the awareness of how sinful you really are and really know what the true grace of God is in light of a works-based, prosperity-themed gospel that is not the gospel at all. But that's what I'm incredibly passionate about. And then maybe on a sideline, Reformed theology, David and I will butt heads about that. And then what types of apologetics to draw from. I said this on the first episode as well, whether it's evidentiary, classical, or presuppositional. I think all have their strengths and limits. And I think depending on who and what kind of conversation we're having, should we be able to utilize any one of them at any given time. So that's just me in a nutshell, and I'm glad to be on tonight to talk about something. I think it was Tyler or Josh who also said this on part 1. Until David gave me the topic and invited me, I didn't think this was a really heated debate for most of church history, and it is. So
Had no idea. So David, if you would, man, give the people just a quick rundown of what we talked about last episode, and then I will hand it over to Josh, because we were right in the middle of his amazing speech about how he was just going to. Anyway, never mind. What were we talking about an hour ago, bro?
Let's first talk about relationships.
Okay.
I love, engaging with my brothers and sisters on TikTok, or like I met Andrew through that, and that's how we've formed this incredible relationship. And that's what it's about. It's not about being Reformed or being Arminian or being whatever. I mean, Arminians are Reformed too, to a degree. You know, they got their own Reformation. You know, but no, in all seriousness, though, and I was telling Andrew a little bit about this, is that I came from my last church was heavily Calvinist, and I was mentored there very successfully. And it gave me more of a heart for people. So there are people that say, preach like a Arminian, but live like a Calvinist, and I'm just like, no, love your brothers and sisters. If you disagree on a topic, who cares? It's a secondary issue. If we're out there winning souls for Christ and we're touching people's souls for Christ, and if we show them that we care more than we care that they care what we know, then that's what's going to win their hearts. We have to touch hearts. That's what's important. That's why me and Andrew clicked like that. He came from a charismatic movement. I came from a word of faith movement. It wasn't oneness like you, but it was word of faith. And that started my trajectory. Where I wanted to, where I told you earlier, and we got into this thing where I said you were wrong and stuff. It really comes to the point is like I've seen where the Reformed tradition takes people, and there's some caveats there that I raise my hands to. I say, it's probably not the best thing to get, to stick or to die on a hill on, and that's what I'd warn against. That's where I would say these are the issues that I have, right? Because I think it can hinder us from even better relationships. But I understand where my Calvinist brothers are coming from. They get this passion and they get this fire inside them. And I love to see the flame of God ignite. And it doesn't matter if you hold to a Calvinistic view, if you hold to an Arminius view, get the gospel out there. Get the gospel out there because it's the power of God unto salvation, right? And now I'm preaching. So I'm just going to slowly back off to go back into Creatio ex Nihilo and tell you that Walton is wrong. Because you know what? There's a lot of steps that we have in there that we have to consider. We have to consider Rashit, Tobu Abohu, and I wish I had written the stuff on Tobu Abohu, because I tell you what, I didn't think it was going to come up. I prepared for Asha, I prepared for Bara, and I prepared for Rashid, but I didn't prepare for Tobu Abohu, and I'm sorry. All I can tell you is that there's a scholar. Her name is Rachel something that I really looked into, and I've heard her name 20,000 times, but I never wrote it down, so I'm not going to remember it. I'm not going to be able to be like one of those guys that say something and then get it wrong, right? So that's my paranoia. That's my thing. So I'm not going to say it, but I do know that she wrote extensively on it. And if you go to John Oswalt, if you click John Oswalt, Creatio ex Nihilo on YouTube, you're going to see what flipped my lid. You're going to see what totally turned my idea of the functioning view into something that I have to reject. Right. And it was his work alone, because it's his work that got me to branch out and to look into everything again. Right. And it brought me to where I am today. Actually, it even brought me closer to one of my favorite people in the world, Hugh Ross, who I've had on my show a couple times. Hugh Ross is one of my heroes. And I tell you what, that man, even though he's a trichotomist, that's fine. I understand. I'm a dualist. But he is the epitome of humbleness. He's the epitome of humbleness that I've seen in this present day. Of course, I'm not comparing him to Christ or Moses, even though Moses did call himself the most humblest person in the world in Numbers. But I do hold him in very high regard. And what he's done with Genesis and the life he's dedicated to Genesis 1, particularly, it now makes more sense than ever. It now makes more sense than ever, because I can see a progressive theology that our fathers have written about, whether it's King David, whether it's Solomon, whether it's Nehemiah, whether it's the author of Hebrews or Paul. I've seen this progression and this fight against eternalism. And I just have to say, yeah, this makes more sense from a Ross perspective and from Oswalt's perspective than it does from Walton's perspective. So as we get into this, I'm really excited to get into Rashid and talk a little bit about in the beginning. So I'll let Tyler take it away because I'm not going to steal a show. So
oh man, you're
go ahead,
good,
brother.
Whoever wants to jump in, Andrew, Josh. Well, let's do this. We ended with Josh last time, so Josh, if you want to kind of start where you left off, and if you would kind of give a brief summary, so people are caught up to what you were saying, and then take off, brother.
All right. So what we've been doing is largely talking about kind of three different views of things, I think. And there's a lot of kind of interplay between them. So one of those being eternalism, and that's the idea that the universe has always existed. And that's something that I want to say, I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's pretty much universally rejected across East and West within the church, that God created what's here. Right. Exactly how that comes about. There are some different ideas. In the East, they actually seem to be a little bit more panentheistic, but I don't know a whole lot about that. So I'm going to leave that where that is and just say it seems like there's something a little different there. In the Western church, we tend to look at it and say God created everything and he created it out of nothing. So that's the position that David is taking, and he's taking it specifically saying that Genesis 1 is talking about that. Right. The flip side of that conversation is kind of throwing a curveball in here. We're talking about the functional view of Genesis 1. And that can be taken in a few different directions. So Walton takes it in the direction where he's basically saying it's only God ordering and not God creating out of nothing. And so he wants to kind of open the door to more of a compatible view between science and the Bible in his view, looking at science and seeing it particularly with evolution and the the ways that people have kind of tried to understand things coming about from a scientific perspective, seeing some consensus there. And so he's kind of trying to make them fit together. What I'm kind of trying to do is recognizing that I think there's a lot of validity to what Walton is doing when it comes to interpreting what we see later on in the text, when we talk about what it means to be made in the image of God, because that's actually connected to this as well. And we talked about that about a month ago, and not necessarily saying that we have to then see it as it's either creation ex nihilo or the functional view. But basically asking the question, can we hold both of these together? Is that something that happens? I think it does. But can we do that from Genesis 1? And so that's what we're discussing is, does Genesis 1 say God created out of nothing, or is it talking about him ordering creation? And then to extend on that, do we see other places in scripture where it talks about God creating things that really could establish creation ex nihilo outside of Genesis 1, which is something that Walton claims exists. So hope that's a good summary of kind of where we've gone so far.
Mm-hmm. Let me go to Genesis 1 through 3 and read it.
I just want to say first that was a perfect summary, Joshua. That was amazing, man. You did a great job there, bro.
Thanks.
Nailed it. He nailed it, man.
With a lot of this stuff, I feel like there's so many moving parts. It's hard to even just kind of orient people on this is what you need to care about, right? And why it matters,
Josh, let me ask this: is that the main thrust? Then the main focus really is Genesis 1 through 3.
Yeah.
Or does it go further than that?
Walton will take it into really the whole chapter of Genesis 1. Okay. And maybe not I'm trying to remember, because isn't it like the first couple of verses of Genesis 2 are kind of more like part of the unit of Genesis 1.
Yeah, it really goes Genesis 2 through 1 through 4. That's kind of the end summary of Genesis 1, right? But let me read 1 through 3, and just so we can all get a perspective where we're coming from, and then Josh, if you would, and Andrew, if you want to comment, and David comment too, just kind of exegete this text and see where Walton is where he sees this functional view at. So let me just start here in Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. And God.
Uh-oh. Did he freeze? David, you're muted. There we go.
Tyler just froze.
He
That's
did.
an epic thumbnail, though. I'll tell you
You
that.
know,
Someone
it is.
screenshot
Look at
that.
Let there be light.
I'm gonna screenshot
internet.
that too. You know?
Yep. You just
Am I
glitched
back?
for a sec. Yep, you're back.
So what did you guys hear?
Everything before and after you reading Genesis 1:1 through 3.
So start with Genesis 1:1 through 3. Gotcha.
There you go. Go ahead, bud.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. In dramatic voice, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. And God said, "Let there be."
Man,
Oh,
he's not going to get to finish it.
Let there be light.
no.
And there was light.
And there was light, and he saw it, and he saw that light was good. Hi, Tyler. How
And
you
there was
doing?
light. And God saw that the light was good. And he
Oh, man.
take the somebody read Genesis 1:1 through
Yep.
3. I'll be right
Oh,
back.
we finished it, man. We're good.
We did. So we focused a little bit. I mean, we mentioned tohu vavohu, and talked a bit about bara, right? And obviously,
Right.
there's some differing views on that. I think present here. I will say, point blank, that mine is not a super educated view on that because I don't know Hebrew. So I'm, going kind of second hand from what I've understood from people that have taught me about it. But I think maybe we should start at the beginning. So Bereshit, the very beginning. What does that mean, David?
All right, so let's look at Rashid, right? Let's look at the beginning. In the form of a constructed or a construct noun, right? Beginning of. Now, this is where a lot of people take it, right? Because it's placed next to the noun, though. I see that let's say it's placed next to the noun, but in Genesis 1, it's actually next to a verb. Sorry. It's actually next to a verb, which makes it substantiative, right? So if you read something like Isaiah 46:10, you'll get the realization there, and then that makes it an independent clause, right? So we can look at that as an independent clause in the beginning, which then establishes that in the beginning, God, right? God exists before anything else, right? This is what it's trying to convey. This is the point it's trying to convey, for the simple fact is that every other pagan culture says the opposite. Remember, the Israelites wanted to be what? Set apart. What better way to set their God apart? Why? Not only because they just wanted to do this and create a polemic to go against everybody, because this is the revealed word of God. There's something that we, in this functional view, and I'm not just saying it exists in the functional view, okay? It exists elsewhere, all right? The functional view, as I see, is kind of the medium. It tries to reconcile things, right? It tries to reconcile what we see in reality, and we try to place things here and there. But I think it robs it of its significance, because I think that the Hebrews got a revelation from God, right? They got this revelation. And when you see that a creator that no other culture had an idea of, that creates outside of space and time, versus a God that creates within space and time, I think we've got to consider that as well. Now, I know Walton wants to highlight that, yes, they wrote in the form of the A&E culture. Yes, they did. There are parts of that, Joshua, that are elements within the Genesis story. The matter of fact, like the reason we have two creation accounts back to back is a very, very eye-opening reality that they wrote in the time that two creation accounts were usually written. You know, that's how the ancient Near East worked. Okay, now their liturgical uh, styles are similar, absolutely, but their stories are dynamically different, and that's what I think really sets Genesis apart from the rest of those ancient Near East constructs. So I think Rashid's a huge indicator that what we see in those four links, that in the beginning God existed before matter, because every other culture has God existing after matter, that or God existing at the same time as matter. So this is where I think that we get too extreme when it comes to Walton, right? But we can also get way extreme on the other side and go for a young Earth interpretation, which I don't think the text purveys or conveys. You know, so I think that we need to find a balance that upholds not only the sovereignty of God, which my Calvinist brother Andrew will like to hear, the sovereignty of God in creation, but his active role in it. And that's why I asked those questions earlier about, does Genesis 1 tell us anything about what God did in creation? But more than that, can biblical theology also be separated from a space-time setting? Can it? I don't think so. I really don't. Because if God's going to give us a revelation, it's got to be something profound. And what I see, like I said, with the Ross stuff and how Ross has investigated this and have taken his initial conditions that he has gleaned from the scriptures and elsewhere throughout the scriptures, which I think is also a part of denying the pagan culture's ideas of it's kind of a polemic against their ideas of creation. I just see this as just coming into this wonderful circle of truth. Like, I don't know. It's hard to describe, but I think it's fascinating.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense? Okay, good.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm trying to think where to. So I think maybe what'll help is to fill out the functional view just a little bit further, to show why I think it matters. And what I think that may help us do is get at this question of whether we're talking about the functional view as an opponent of creation ex nihilo, or something that actually can work together. Because Walton obviously thinks they can. He just thinks that Genesis 1 isn't addressing material creation. He thinks that's addressed elsewhere. So he wouldn't say that God didn't create out of nothing. He just thinks that this isn't about that. So that's one of the things that gets kind of interesting here is obviously you disagree with his assessment of Genesis 1. So, that's clear for sure. But why would it matter? Why take a functional view of creation, and what does it tell us about who God is and who we are? And how is it different from what we see in other ancient Near Eastern cultures and in pagan cultures, right? That I think is maybe important to lay out just even a couple minutes. Does that sound good?
It does. Let me ask you this as you go in. I want you to think about this, okay?
Yeah.
If we accept Genesis 1 through 11 as inspired revelation instead of inspired speculation, what grounds do we have to really trust it if it's just speculation? Versus, we look at Abraham as a historical figure. Yeah. God is always revealing himself through individuals of history that have actually lived in this world. Why is Genesis 1 through 11 any different? Why is it not historical narrative? Think about it.
I'll go right there and say it. How in the world is someone supposed to write a historical narrative of Genesis 1? we weren't there until,
but that's the beauty of it,
right?
Like,
So it's revealed,
we can get,
right?
Exactly, but we can test that, right? We can test that from what we see in reality, the Big Bang, right? Universe from nothing, right? Information, teleology, the fact that there's information in everything that we encounter, whether it's just the painting on a wall to our biological DNA, you know. Then we've got this wonderful world where there has to be a God that cares about us, because why give us moral commands and ethics?
Mhm.
You know. And Andrew, this is where the evidentialist case really comes to play, and this is what. Okay, so before I say that, Andrew, specifically, I love your ideas of presups, right? And your respect for presuppositionalism. And I think they work. And I think you said it the other day how you love Jeff Durbin. They work phenomenally in the streets by breaking down worldviews. But it's not going to win an atheist that's already committed, right? And the reason that is because there, like you said before, there's a volitional aspect in there. But God can be a God of means and use the evidence to begin to change that heart. So, as a cumulative case apologist, I use presuppositionalism, I use evidentialism, I use classicalism. I don't use reformed epistemology that much, but I do see a place for it. And I do think that all these wonderful apologetic methods can bleed together without being so separated from each other. And this is where I see the Reformed tradition falter the most. You remember, I don't know if you've ever heard of the term frozen chosen, right? And I know I'm going way off topic here. I'm going to give it back to you, Josh.
I was going to say, where are we getting back?
But you've heard the term, right? So, this is where I think that, like, we could all learn from each other, and we can learn from those individual prospects. But that's just me. Sorry, but I'll let you go back to it. What's that?
No, it's perfectly fine. To weigh in on that, I would actually say I'm an outlier in the Reformed tradition. And before I ever had respect for precept, I had much more respect for evidential apologetics, because it's what got me through my crisis of faith. The limit that precept can go into is talking into a circle, right? And so when you're having incredible emotional doubts, you don't want to keep being told, well, just believe it. Like,
right.
And sometimes that's the logical
Yeah.
conclusion of what's being said a lot of times in precept, but you need to have reasons why. I think evidential apologetics is going to be great for bolstering up people who are already in the church. But I think the defining factor for all classes of apologetics is without the Holy Spirit, it's all for naught. And I've seen that happen, and I'm not going to name names, but I've seen evidential apologists say, my ability to reason with someone, my ability to convince an atheist to change their mental assent or their confirmation bias on this topic, if they can just believe Jesus rose and God exists, they're good. And yes, I would actually say those are the two pillars in which the Christian faith is founded on. If God doesn't exist, obviously, we need to all pack it up and go home. And if Jesus didn't raise from the grave, the best we have is deism, because Islam and all of these other religions, they're self-defeating. So I get that those are the two prominent things that those have to be objectively true, or Christianity falls apart. But I think in the evidential world, people mistake mental assent with saving faith. Fiducia is the Latin word, a real trust that presupposes. And in the Reformed tradition as well, here's the thing I'm going to side with on that side, is that regeneration has to precede faith. The Spirit has to turn that heart of stone into a heart of flesh in order to even give you a mind to say, I mean, 1 Corinthians is even clear, no man can say Jesus is the Christ or Jesus is Lord except by the Holy Spirit. So yes, we need to number down on what Genesis 1's saying from a Creatio ex Nihilo perspective. But here's the thing. Yeah. I'm getting back into it, and I'm gonna give it back to you guys.
Keep going.
If
Keep going.
at the very end of the day, Genesis taught us a young Earth view and material creation, that's going to sound like foolishness to the atheist until their heart's regenerated, until the Holy Spirit shows up and does what only He can do. But I think that's where we're all united on. And I'm not trying to make this one giant kumbaya moment without really saying much. But we all have a dedication to, okay, if it says this is what Jesus would have believed while He was on the earth about Genesis. So that's what we're all aiming to go towards. Now, I see the point that you're making. So the polemic against Genesis is not just, hey, I'm going to beat you on your own playing field, but hey, our God actually is on an entirely different level than those other mythological polytheistic gods that use pre-existing material. That aspect of your argument I really appreciate. But here's the thing I wanted to ask, because I know if I mute myself and let people talk again and I don't ask this, I'm going to beat myself up. Have you heard Michael Heiser talk about Genesis 1:1 lacking the definite article? I mean, you even said Bereshit is next to a verb, and the actual Hebrew rendering would go something like when God began creating. So it's not an actual, you could argue from that point that it's not an actual origin point of the entire universe. Have you been presented with that argument, or just wanted to see what you'd say to that?
Matter of fact, I heard it today, and the fact that it's actually where it's placed and what I told you about it being substantiated. Let me see. The fact that it makes it an independent clause, as an open colophon, puts God existing first. So that's what I would reiterate to you, because this is where even Heiser, I think, is influenced by history, right? And which is fine. You know, I mean, we have to take into account these views. Rashi was the first one to come up with this idea, you know, that the heavens and the earth were like, it was kind of like God just kind of forming them, right? So, but the way where it's placed and the merism that it forms into, I think when you look at those together and you see that there's an independent clause in Rashid, right? And then you see the merism, I don't think there's any denying that this is talking about a God that exists before matter, before space, before everything. Simple. Look at that. And maybe I'm not clear. Maybe
Can I jump in?
not doing this. Hold on one
Yeah,
second.
go ahead.
But
Go ahead.
if you look at that in the socio-historical cultural background with them fighting against pagans, I think that meshes well. I don't know. I don't see them doing the same as the ancient Near East. I see them going against the grain. Just like Jesus tells Paul, why kicking against the goads? I think they were kicking against the goads at the time. Anyways, go ahead, Tyler.
Well, I don't know if it has anything to do with, because I kind of jumped in late and I missed a lot of stuff there. Sorry about that. But I was presented something, and I don't want to mention any names because I'm afraid that'll get a thing started. But time, did God create time? And I see it kind of being talked about in the chat, though. But did God create time, or is time something that's eternal, or an aspect of God, or something? Go ahead.
So space and time and the universe all come into existence at the Big Bang. Time didn't exist before space. It didn't exist before the Big Bang. Time, you know, that's part of nature. That's part of what comes about when God says, let there be, right? or in the beginning.
So it
God
all comes
created,
in simultaneously. Right? So with the let there be light, is that whenever light, time, all these things come in?
No. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Right. The heavens and the earth. The Hebrews didn't have a word for universe. So when you see heavens and the earth, you have to understand that's a merism. Right. That's a combination of two words to equal like one idea. You know, all of reality. So in the beginning, God created all of reality. All right. So he creates everything. all the matter, everything that is needed. So space, time, everything. That's why it's Creatio ex Nihilo, right?
Right.
Because he creates speaking, right? It's just wild. But that's kind of like how it is. So God creates time as well. God exists before time. Now, we can't understand that because we think in sequence, right? We think in one event after another, right? We can't
You would naturally
understand that.
ask, how
Just
long
like-
did God exist before time? And
Right. And
Right,
you
that
really
right.
can't
defeats
ask that.
its own question.
It makes no sense. And this is why I don't understand Calvinists, is because they try to understand God's omniscience, which I don't think you can understand. So this is why I don't take a huge position on either or.
We just
So-
exegete scripture. That's all we do.
Yeah, and you
Huh.
fail. And you fail
Oh,
really
no,
badly.
man.
No, it's funny that I do say this because I did tell you this earlier. I don't know if you caught it, but there isn't a lot of really robust Arminian work, a lot of work out there.
Mhm.
But until you read Romans 9 from Brian Apiscano, then come back and talk to me. We can have a substantial debate on Romans chapter 9 and predestination. But
Right
until unless you've done that, I really can't take you too seriously, because I understand the Reformed tradition so much that they look at their
Andrew.
own side so much and they love their own side so much that they don't really give, because it's hard to actually do. It's hard to actually find good Arminian sources.
Andrew,
Yeah. Mhm.
you want
What's
to
up?
you want
Just
to
do
you want
that.
to take that challenge together
But
on
I'll
that?
read it. Yeah.
By
I
all
mean,
means,
I'm
by
up to
all
reading
means.
it.
Let's
Hey,
do
look,
it, and then let's do a
start
response
with-
video on it.
And you know
down?
what? I hate to do this because he's my friend and I like to make fun of him more than I like to promote him. But David Paulman has some really good stuff on his website when it comes to all this stuff. I don't agree with him about eternal security. I am an internal security guy. But he does make some excellent arguments, because he actually, and I helped him. I told him who Brian Abascano was, and to look into Romans 9, and he did, and more power to him. He made a video that was phenomenal. Look at all his stuff. Look at all his stuff with an open mind.
Right
Not
on.
with your Calvinist lenses. Look at it with an open mind.
See, I like that
know
because-
that you are going to bite down on something solid. You might bite down still on Calvinism.
Right,
I don't really care. I love you anyway. But anyways,
it's
but
not
look into
something-
it. It's not. There is a robust theology that
Fair enough.
Arminians have that is not known, that is not
Fair enough.
widely known.
fair enough.
I
It's
think
not- it's
that's
not
because it's
Wesley.
still
There's a
being
reason
developed.
for that, but whatever.
There is a reason for it, and you know what? Hey, look, the Arminian view dominated from the 1950s to Wesley. Okay,
That's because
Wesley
people love
got-
a man-centered gospel. I mean, yeah,
but,
you're
but,
gonna.
no, but look, come on, Wesley wasn't that bad. Wesley was amazing. He was
I love
on par.
Josh just sitting
He
there
was
chilling.
on par with Whitfield.
I'm just like,
Okay.
Wesley
okay,
is
we
the
can
guy
get back on
behind
topic whenever.
Guys.
complete sanctification, though. Complete
But think about it.
sanctification is very problematic, and he coined that.
There's a lot of problematic things with both camps that both camps produce.
Agreed.
Okay, there
All right,
is.
Yeah.
Creatio ex
Okay.
nihilo.
And if we're gonna fault a man, I mean, I love Martin Luther. I love Martin Luther.
He was insane, though.
But he went insane. But nobody understands that it was the gout that made him insane. His gout made him insane. Okay?
But if that was the
it
means,
was not the same. If it was not the same, it's not. Come on, dude.
Oh, you're gonna
He
bring
wasn't
means and
the
ends
same
into it.
man.
Wow.
He just wasn't the same man. Come on.
This
He was
is-
not the same man. He was not the same man from earlier on. And you could see that. You could see that
No.
reflected in his writings. I mean, when you get a guy that's talking like Jesus, and then 100, well, not 100, but like 40 years later, he's talking like Hitler, there's something going on. You know what I mean? But anyways, back to Creatio ex
Yeah.
Nihilo. Let's go back. Josh, before you could start. I've got to go real quick. I'll be right back.
Okay,
But good.
go ahead, Josh.
Well, shoot, this is partly for him.
Oh man.
we
No,
can
that's right.
recap.
Yeah. So, why would taking the functional view matter, and why do I think it's important, and why do I, definitely think that it's a thing, right? I mentioned when we were in the last episode about cognate terms, and one of the places that we see this actually is in the term that's used for the image of God, Salem, in Hebrew and Salmu in Akkadian. And when we look at that and we actually think about it, and if you actually take it forward into the Septuagint in the Greek and the way that they translate it as icon, what you come away with is that God places humanity in the garden as his idol. That's uncomfortable for most Christians because we only understand idolatry as the twisted nature of it that we see in paganism, right? But I think what we see is that we were placed in the garden, humanity is placed in the garden to represent and embody God on earth, right? That was the purpose. And that is a purpose that we see carried forward in the church. When we talk about the church being the body of Christ, that's a direct tie into this idea of embodiment of a deity, right? Obviously in a different way than they ever really understood in the ancient Near East. But again, it actually kind of ties in really well. And you have other things that tie in really well with that too. So you talk about, humanity in believers being indwelled by the Holy Spirit. Idols were made, and then there were ceremonies that people did that they tried to open the mouth and to actually draw a spirit, localize a spirit or a god in their belief into that idol, right? And what we see in this contrast between biblical theology and what you see in paganism is that pagans had idols that people had to make. And then they had to do these ceremonies to try to then draw the spirit or the god into that idol. And there's a complete contrast with what we see in the Bible. What we see in the Bible is we have humanity as living, moving beings being the ones that are to represent God, which is a completely it's a totally different class of thing than saying I have this wood or stone that's supposed to represent me, right? And it's to the point where the high priest, when they get up and they're all get all the things on that they're supposed to wear when they're doing things in Israel, is dressed like a Canaanite idol. It's meant to be a slap in the face. It's meant to be a polemic. It's meant to say, no, you are worshiping wood and stone that can't even move on its own. You are worshiping these, deities in your mind that can't even, they couldn't make the idol for themselves. We are worshiping the one true living God who created everything. It's a complete substantive difference. And part of the way that you see that is when you understand that the words that are used for humanity being created in the image of God and the location of them in Eden, in creation, is in a temple. And if that's true, you start to work back into that and see all of the other things kind of playing out of God ordering things and saying, okay, this is going to be here. This is going to be here. This is going to function this way. This is going to function this way. That creates everything and then culminates in God placing his idol in the temple and then God resting in his temple, which are two things that you see consistently done with temples by gods in ancient Near Eastern literature, but on a completely different scale. It's like, you can't even relate the two. They're so different, right?
Yeah, but Josh,
and that's part of what Genesis is getting across.
Right, Josh. But here's my issue: is that there are no temples with Abraham. We don't have temples yet, and I understand, but we've got to take into consideration: are we?
Hold on. You're going to tell me that there are no temples before Abraham?
Well, like the temples that we're considering, where it's the one house of God and stuff. No,
right.
Like
if we're talking about an Israelite temple, you're right. I mean,
yeah.
But the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat. That was a temple.
But are we considering that? I understand that, but it's like we're trying to marry the cultures, and I don't think that's the case. I think this is a totally different culture. I see too many distinctives to say that they were one culture. I think these guys were set apart.
I'm not saying they're one culture. What I'm saying is that when we compare the two and we start to try to actually set them side by side, there's a lot of stuff that pops out that is so very different about what we see in Scripture.
I think it's too different to be able to mesh together, but that's just me. Anyways,
okay,
I'll let you finish. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of curious where you think I'm meshing things together, because what I'm looking at is I'm basically saying, the similarities that we see illustrate the completely different character and utterly different superior being that is the God of the Bible, who is called Yahweh El Olam, the one who has existed forever, you know, in Scripture. Like it's something completely
maybe
different.
I missed that. Maybe
Yeah.
I missed the part because I did have to get up and help my 5-year-old. So
Yeah.
so go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, all I'm saying is that I think when we look at the functional view and we start to see how it ties in with the image of God and the things that starts to unfold and how well that fits in with the theology that we see really throughout Scripture of what God is doing in creating humanity and then in recreating us in the image of Christ, kind of making that image bring us back into his likeness. It's very consistent throughout Scripture, and the functional view helps to kind of fill out the color of what's happening in Genesis that really shows us that, right? Now, all of that to say, nothing I've said so far means that you have to say that Genesis doesn't mean also creation out of nothing, right? That's taking it further, and that's obviously where people like Walton go. But I think what I'm trying to get at is I don't think we need to toss out the functional view if we're trying to say we believe in creation ex nihilo. I think you can hold them together.
Yeah. I think I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Sorry about that earlier. I think I understand what you said. I do think is validity in some of the functional view. Absolutely. I do believe that there are parallels. The parallels I do think we have to understand in the light of the socio cultural context, right?
I mean, the last thing we want to do is import Egyptian ideas into the Bible in a way that corrupts
I
the
hear you there. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Which is interesting. I think we have to do that. I think we have to read it in the light of the ancient Near East culture. But I do think there has to be that separation. And I think you alluded to it, and I may have misunderstood it at first. But I think you have to understand where that dividing line is, right? And I think that's what we're trying to do. I think maybe even Walton's trying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he gets it wrong, right? So and even like you said, you're not as studying it. I'm not as studied in it either. This is just me stewing around for the last couple months and looking into scholars and stuff like that, and it amazes me. But where it comes to me in the most logical sense is that, like, wow, these guys were definitely against the pagans of the time.
Yeah.
They set up a polemic. There's a stark contrast. And where do we get to the point where we're saying this is a revelation of God? What makes Genesis unique? It is unique. And I'm telling you, I haven't read any other holy book that gets the initial conditions of what we see in science and the book of nature than we get with Genesis 1. We get Genesis 1, we get all those initial conditions. It's like a 10 out of 10, right? The Enuma Elish comes in second with 2 out of 10.
Yeah, it's pretty stark.
So it is. So it's like, okay, we get day one. We get God creating all of physical reality, right? We get God creating the heavens and the earth, matter, sun, stars, everything. We get the planet. We get a perspective change, which a lot of people don't pick up on, right? We get a perspective change.
Between 1 and 2, or are you talking about verse 1?
Between 1 and 2, right? Verses 1 and 2, right? We get him coming to the formless earth, right? Right? Everything's void. Earth is like a wasteland, right? So we get him looking out upon creation. We get
I think we have to see a perspective change there, because verse 2 talks about the earth as if it's something that exists.
Exactly.
Whereas verse 1 talks about it something that God is creating. Although you almost, I think part of the conversation here becomes, is verse 1 meant to be like, here's the first step? Or is verse 1 essentially, here is me giving you a summary of what I'm about to say?
No,
right?
I really think this
because
is the first.
The rest of Genesis 1 is talking about God creating the heavens and the earth. So in some way, you could almost say that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth is this like header, like we have in our Bibles for things where sometimes people put them in and they aren't really there. But in this case, it is. And then the verses 2 and on are describing what the actual process of that happening. I mean, that's the way some people read it. And I think it's interesting to look at it.
Yeah, I get you. I see people do that all the time, but
Yeah.
I really think that when we look at this, we can follow the progression. I really again, I take the Ross view on this. I really think that we see that God creates the heavens and the earth, and we see that merism, right? We see that proclamation. I think it asserts, it doesn't imply, it asserts that God created this. And I
What do you
think
think about the
that's
fact that we
prevalent.
have light created before we have the sun, moon, and stars?
Well, I mean, you have a light in the Big Bang too. I mean, cosmic. You have that
Okay.
explosion. Yeah, so I don't
Yeah.
see a problem there. Maybe
Let
if
me-
you specified the question.
Can I jump in real quick? Do you guys
Go
both
ahead.
Go for it.
affirm the Big Bang?
What's that?
Do you guys both affirm the Big Bang,
I absolutely do. Yeah,
Josh?
I see evidence of it.
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I haven't seen anything that makes me think it didn't happen. I just also happen to think that was
Let me
the moment of
let me
God,
show you something, Tyler. Before
saying,
we go further on,
Yeah,
I've seen evidence of the Big Bang through that.
fair enough.
So
Fair enough.
I actually do my own stuff when it comes to my
So, okay.
research.
So
When it comes to that,
let me ask this
so
then. So
yes.
in the biblical text, where do you guys place the Big Bang? Is that Genesis 1, 2, 3? Where is that?
That's 1-1. In the beginning,
1-1.
God
So
created the heavens and the earth.
So
The
David,
heavens and the earth. Let me finish. The heavens and the earth is a merism. Okay, remember the Hebrew language only had about 3,100 words in it. So multiple different or one word can have multiple literal definitions, like yom, right? We can see that the word day has about 4 definitions, right? Where the word earth has 50 definitions throughout the Hebrew text. Okay.
Yeah, I actually think
Literal
it's interesting that Earth is what's translated here,
right? So
'cause
we
you
see.
could even just say the heavens and the land, or
Well,
the right.
you could, but here's the thing: what it's trying to connote is that all of reality is created when God spoke. That's really what it's trying to convey. And I really think that if we look at that seriously, we can see those 4 links that I was referring to earlier. That in the beginning, God exists before matter. Okay.
right?
Because this is a huge topic that these guys are trying to discuss.
I guess.
These guys have warred with the pagans on pre-existing matter. I mean,
Yeah.
the Enuma Elish, we get dragons getting cut open, and that's how they form humanity. Their
Do you know how
blood
the
and
Egyptians said that
same.
the universe was created? I'm not going to say it here, but I mean, because I don't
Yeah,
think
you
it's
don't have to
appropriate.
worry about it.
But
I
it's still
understand, yeah.
it's wild, bro. But I guess where I'm kind of coming from,
Go
I don't know, maybe I was not specific, but from just the text itself, from what you're saying, David, from what I'm saying is you're saying light is created at the Big Bang. That's what you said earlier, right? And that for you happens at Genesis 1:1. My question then would be in Genesis 1:3, whenever God said, "Let there be light," what significance is that if that's already created? This is way
Right.
back in Genesis 1:1.
And that's where I actually think there might be some validity to the idea that the verse 1 is basically the here's what I'm going to tell you about, and then verses 2 through the rest of the chapter and even into the first verses of chapter 2 are, and now I'm going to actually tell you the story, right? Because
Yeah.
if you say that in the beginning, like, at the very beginning of everything that we know, God created the heavens and the earth. Now let me tell you how, right? Then you have the earth is formless and void, and God does these things, and God says, let there be light, and then there's light. And you don't end up kind of having these 2 moments of like, well, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, Big Bang. And then he says, let there be light, and there's light. And then on day 4, he creates the sun, the moon, and the stars. Like, it gets kind of awkward to me to try to bring that into a chronology that's really tight. But I mean, again, I'm just seeing things and kind of going, I don't know how to make sense of that. So I'm happy to have someone explain that to me.
Why don't we read Genesis 1:1 and 2? I think that would
I
help.
tried to do that a while ago, and it didn't
Andrew,
work
I
out
think
at
I'm going to
all.
ask you to do it because
Please, somebody
you
else
have
do
not
that.
talked yet in a little bit.
No, it's all right because I'm actually queuing up some questions in my mind, and I know at a certain point we want to take questions from the audience.
Yeah.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Now, first question I have in relation to these passages, if you think Genesis 1:1 is the Big Bang, and due to our dating of the Big Bang, the universe is 13.89 billion years old. And the Earth's only existed for 4.6 billion years. Do you really think there's continuity, or there's this ambiguous 9 billion years between Genesis 1 and 1 and then when God actually begins to create things on the earth and in the earth?
I don't see a problem. If we're looking at day and we're looking at yom in the aspect of a long period of time, I think we can say that, hey, I don't see the evening and the morning as like 24 hours or maybe even 1,000 hours or 1,000 years, but we can say that it's a beginning and an end. Like, so God has this progression that it's a hierarchy of creation, right? So we have God saying, this is how I did it. Okay, this is the end of a day, this is the beginning of the day. Okay, the day came and it came out and it ended, and that's where it stopped, right? That's where it ended. If we go back to this whole idea of light, okay, I want to go back to address this because I didn't earlier. We say, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth was without. So right there, the earth was without form, and darkness was over the face of the deep. Now we go, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. There's your perspective change. The Spirit is outside, looking out, and doing that. Let there be light. So that the atmosphere, which I alluded to earlier, okay, the atmosphere comes from totally dark. The earth is covered in darkness by its primordial atmosphere. God now takes the atmosphere from being totally dark to somewhat translucent, not transparent, opaque. You could call it that. I don't know which one you get it, what clicks in your mind the best, but it's not fully clear yet. It's not transparent yet. We don't get that until day 4. Okay. Which also I think works against the functioning view, because now why would we get functioning after functioning? If he's already saying this is the functioning, this is what I'm ordering in the way of function, we get day 4, which is I'm ordering function, but now I'm ordering more function. Anyways, that's just a question I haven't fleshed out yet. Maybe you can address it. I'll learn from you.
So, I mean, I think what we see when we see the difference between, verse 3 and God saying, let there be light, and there was light, and things like, and there was evening and there was morning the first day. And then in day 4, we see the sun created. I think there's very likely something there that's aimed right at things like the Egyptians' belief in Ra, the sun god, right? Because what you have is God saying, let there be light, and there's light before the sun. And the Egyptians would have been like, dude, like Ra is the light, Ra is the sun. How does this even work? Right. So there's this pushing back against that kind of a thing. You have the same thing by saying evening first and then morning, because it's not in Egyptian ideas. The thing was that the sun would rise, and this is an act of creation. And so that's what would start things. And then the sun would set. And you had this kind of sense of that rhythm for them. And by saying, that no, actually what happened first was, God said, let there be light, and it was good. And then he says, and there's evening, and there's morning the first day. Well, there's evening before there's even morning. Right. So God creates before we even get to the possibility of there being a sun in the Egyptians' mind.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. But we're not Egyptian. We're studying Hebrew, right? So, and I know if we accept,
but this was written by Hebrew, by people that knew Hebrew, that had been, Moses.
Were they?
Were they?
Was this not an oral tradition before they went into captivity in Egypt?
Time out, though. Wasn't Genesis written as a polemic against this kind of stuff?
No, it was written as a polemic against the pagan cultures during Abraham's time, not during their time in Egypt. See, now you're accepting the P document. You're accepting P. And I don't accept that. I don't accept that. I think this oral tradition was alive and well long before. How did we get Job if it wasn't? And then we have the creation stories in Job that
So
reflect.
So
that
you're
reflect
denying
even better.
denying Mosaic authorship is what you're doing.
No, I absolutely not. I think Mosaic. I think he penned it, but I think these
Okay.
oral traditions were around a lot longer than well, some of these oral traditions were around a lot longer,
Okay,
and I
interesting.
think the rest was a revelation from God. You know,
Okay.
who knows? But I don't. I'm not going to consider what we have the most of, because I
So
think there is evidence that these goes back earlier than that.
I guess what I would say
Because
is
I
if
think the accuracy, hold on, Josh,
Yeah.
the accuracy of the political environment we see in the ancient Near East during Abraham's time, and the fact that we've confirmed Joseph's wells.
Yeah.
Now I can affirm Mosaic authorship, but say, hey, look, God gave him this
Sure.
because he gets all this right. He
Yeah.
gets everything from Abraham down to Joseph right.
Well,
Right.
and I think we have to
So
look at
anyways.
it that way somehow,
Yeah.
right? Because
Somewhat. Yeah.
nobody was there in the beginning except for God. So there's no other witness you can have to this act, right? So obviously
Right.
some of it has to be revelation. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
it's, if we look at Genesis 1 through 11 kind of as a unit, there are reasons why a lot of scholarship sees this as a polemic aiming at Babylon and at their other neighbors, because there's so much stuff that's directly aimed at other gods and other traditions.
You're right. There's a polemic there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I guess for me, when I look at it and I say, I think maybe what was going on, and you could kind of fit this into this actually works both ways kind of framework. So I'll try to be as like, this works for you and for me as I can, and then we'll see if it works. What happened was God telling, giving revelation that was written down by Moses specifically for the purpose of A, telling people how God did things, and B, pushing back against all the crap that they learned when they were slaves in Egypt. And so the way that this is actually unfolded, it's not that it's not history, it's that it's history that's written with a specific purpose. So it's true and it's accurate, but it's also aimed directly at the gods of Egypt and the gods of Mesopotamia and the gods of, that's what I think is going on here. And I think it kind of fits both those ideas that this is, pre-exists in some way, but it's also something that's put forth to aim directly at all these things that they have learned that were wrong.
Well, now you're not just purely taking on the functional view.
Yeah.
You're taking on my view mixed with the functional view. That's
Yes.
not fair, man.
I
Andrew,
have
what
no
do you
problem
think?
doing that, though.
Hold on.
See,
let me see what Andrew thinks so far.
Man, it's like watching Goku versus Vegeta, and you're Krillin. Okay. I'm realizing at the point, there's a lot of merit to what Joshua's saying. I think he has more comfortability to be objectively true and it not threaten each other's views. He can actually take elements of your view. I don't know if you've been granted that convenience yet.
Okay. All right. Okay. So one thing that I think, if you're marrying my view with the functional view, I really can't, because it's not developed fully yet.
Yeah.
And I would love to see you develop a view that incorporates both, because where we stand right now is that it's not truly developed.
So let me try to do a little bit here just to kind of set the stage.
And I think I agreed with you earlier that I do see elements of functionality to it.
Yeah, you did.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, essentially what I like to do with a lot of these things is try to see what common ground we have and then see where things just fall away. Right.
Yeah.
Because obviously, there are different views for a reason. And sometimes that reason is this view's wrong and that view's right. Sometimes it's this view has the right emphasis about these details and this view has maybe not quite the right emphasis, right? And so it's a question of kind of the priority and how we blend them. But one of the things that I think we see a lot actually is, and this bothers people, but I think it bothers people because they don't have the divine council worldview in their heads and they don't understand how this kind of functioned. But if you look at what God told Moses to do when he was building the temple, there are a ton of similarities with the way the Egyptians built their temples. So what do you do with that, right? Do you say that Moses was stealing from Egypt? Do you say that God was plagiarizing from the gods of Egypt? right? Like those are questions people ask. And a lot of people kind of get unsettled by this because they look at it and they say, well, Egypt is an older civilization and, Israel came out of Egypt. So what do we do with that? And I think that what people miss when they start thinking that way is if God preexisted everything, then God's the oldest thing there is, right? And that means he also preexisted the heavenly host that were created. And if we take the divine council worldview and we say, yes, we actually believe that the gods of the nations have some kind of spiritual reality to them in that they are created beings. They were part of God's heavenly host and they rebelled in accepting worship. This is not something they were supposed to do. Then, of course, think about it. If they existed in the council of God, they know what things look like in heaven. So they're able to, basically kind of imitate and say, okay, people, I want a temple. It needs to be kind of like this because that's what I see in the heavenly host and the heavenly court. And I wish that was mine. And I want it to be like that. And then people imitate that based on what their interactions with this spirit. But it's a cheap imitation, right? So what we see, I think, in the Bible is not only the, God saying, first of all, I was here first, but also it's God restoring the truth and putting things right and saying, no, this is incorrect. This is a twisting. This is a lie. This is something that you've been told by a spirit that wants to be a God, but I created that spirit. They ain't a God, right? I think that's a lot of what we see going on here, but we get mixed up because we only think of it in terms of God and then human history. And we forget about the fact that there are other beings in the heavens that actually do things. Does that make sense?
No, I hear you. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. No, it makes total sense to me. Yeah, I guess. No, I hear you. Yeah. I'll let Andrew respond to that. That's interesting. That's something I have to think more about too, as well.
It's a mind trip. So
It is a mind
I totally get it.
I'm elementary to divine council theology, but I affirm it based on Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 82. And that seems to fit completely, but it is going to have to be something that I personally take back and try to filter out more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So,
and I would.
So one of the reasons that I think that gets really interesting is when you start looking at the works of Andrew Lang and Wilhelm Schmidt, and kind of these debates that people had over the last couple hundred years about where religion came from. Right. You have this evolutionary view that started to kind of really creep in, where it was people saying, oh, well, people were just dumb and then they got smarter. And where they were dumb, it was when they thought everything was a spirit, right? Pantheism. And then where they're smart is when they finally got around to this 19th century German Protestant Christianity that's monotheistic, right? They kind of saw this trajectory of things. And I think they maybe saw things a little bit too much in their own image, if you will. But what we actually see in the works of Andrew Lang and Wilhelm Schmidt is very much the sense that what we see in the oldest cultures, when we go back and we look at Aboriginal tribes in Australia, right? They originally believed in a Most High God. And then they started to worship other things.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that pattern in a number of different places. And there seems to be this sense where people, and you can, say this happened at Babel. I don't know how to say that happened and then fit it in with all the nations around the world that weren't at Babel, whatever. But I think what we see is Genesis telling us something about the beginning of paganism and people actually worshiping the created rather than the creator. And they did that in part because the created were corruptible, and they would give them things that they wanted that a Most High God, who's morally perfect, won't.
But here's let me ask you this, okay?
Yeah.
Because I don't think you addressed this on my end. Okay, I've said it several times, and we keep going back because I end up turning the argument. It's my fault, but
okay.
But what do you think about how well the science and Genesis 1 match up on my view? I think it's phenomenal that it expresses what we see in reality. Like when you say, let there be light, if we change perspectives and we look like Galileo says, and we look up and we see that God makes the sky translucent versus being totally dark, like in Job 38 and 39.
Mm.
We see those cooperate completely and perfectly in unity. There's just no way.
I mean, from what I've seen, I think
anyways,
that's
I can't-
true.
it's
I have not seen
breathtaking.
as much as you have on that. So that's probably why you're getting more silence from me on that. Is it's something I haven't
Okay.
studied as in depth. But
And
for me,
this
I
is where
do see things
Andrew
like the
did
Big
say
Bang,
that I didn't
and I
get.
say that fits, right? You know, I can see a lot of these things where I think broad strokes they fit. How much detail have I looked at them in? Yeah, not enough to be. Yeah,
It's so funny though. I mean, how can you go without like? To me, maybe this is my analytical head. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know. That okay? I see every little dot and T crossed. Like I see the initial conditions. I see Genesis getting 10 out of 10. Okay,
Yep.
I see day one. I see it all reality made. Right. In day two, I see a water cycle. Right. In day three, it goes on like that. Like I see the plants and the oxygenation event. Right. That allows for plants and animals to thrive, right? And then you see like the dips in the oxygenation events that correlate to say, okay, look, we got 3% here, but it went into some mineral bowl to keep us from getting oxygen right away. Obviously, it had to minerals had to absorb oxygen and so forth, so we could have an abundance, right? And then I see 8%, right? We get to 8% of this oxygenation, right? And then all of life, or not all of life, but all the soft shell, the animals, the Mesozoic animals appear out of nowhere, right? Just boom, they're there, right?
Yeah.
Then we get up to 10%, right? It's 10 or maybe more, and we see 85% of all life and all body plans just appear out of nowhere. There's no time. There's no evolutionary time for this to take place. It just happens. It just happens.
Mm-hmm.
And and we see that like for years people would say that Genesis got it wrong when it said that what animals or the that the vegetation produced before the stuff in the ocean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see that no, we now have isotopes that tell us that on the continents there is an abundance of plant life before there was sea life, sea stuff, or the sea animals. And it fits so well. It lines up the Ross view and so forth, and you can test their theories, and you can predict what's going to happen next. And this is why I'm a huge reasons to believe fan. Is because I haven't seen where they got it wrong totally yet. Maybe they've been wrong on some things in the past, maybe when it comes to like some theories, but as far as their predictions, I haven't seen them getting anything wrong. But I understand, and I do agree that there is some functionality to your view, or to the view. I think that we have to take that into consideration. However, I think that Walton takes it too far, and I think Heiser takes it too far, and I think it robs the power of the entire account as being a separate story than those of the ancient Near East. There is a separation there. But anyways, I'll digress.
Hey,
Where's
David,
Tyler?
quick question
Yeah,
before he just said in the chat he couldn't connect. But do you think denying creation ex nihilo, even just for the functional view, do you think the only logical conclusion is eternalism? So if God's revealing Genesis through the author, and let's grant functionalism, is God saying yes, this matter's always existed? Like, do
I
you
think
think that's the only solid? Like, I would
I
say
do.
the only consistent Arminian is an open theist, right? I think that's the only logical conclusion. I just had to get that jab in there.
You
Sorry,
did.
but
Fine.
do you think that would be the only consistent alternative? Then okay, we believe Genesis 1 and 2 are talking about functionality, but we still think God created all things. It's just Genesis 1 isn't talking about that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that inconsistency in the functionality view, the only thing we could believe is eternalism?
Just like there's hyper Calvinism, I think there's hyper functionalism. Okay, I think I just made that up on the fly. Sorry, but I do think what Sherman is saying is pretty legit. Like, he thinks that there can be, and I came into here saying that there is some of that functionality there.
Yeah,
we did discuss that on the outset, in way before, right? We did discuss that there is some of that. We can't rob the Genesis 1 of its ancient Near Eastern origins, but we can't take it too far into its origins. We have to look at it being uniquely different and starkly different, as Walton says, even that there are there's parallels, but there's a lot of things that are different. Okay, I think we need to focus more on the differences than we do on the similarities to get a coherent doctrine of Creatio ex Nihilo, because I think it's that important to our faith. If we can say that matter exists alongside of our God, we run into a pretty bad, and I would say, heresy.
I think that's heresy too.
Yes, I would.
Yeah,
say
I mean, I don't think what we
Anyways.
have is eternal matter. I think the only two views that I've seen that maybe can get at this are Creatio ex Nihilo and a kind of Christian panentheism. And I don't even understand that well enough to look at it and say I know what that means. But
yeah, it's
just the idea that instead of creating out of nothing, God created out of himself, right?
Yeah, it's idealism. Yeah, it's idealism.
So maybe that, but I haven't looked at it enough to have a clue. So I do feel like we either have, what we do not have is eternal matter alongside God. I think when we get into thinking that that is taking on a lot of what you're talking about when you're talking about the way that pagan gods did things and the understandings the pagans had of their gods. And I do not think that's what we see in the Bible. I think we see a very clear creation distinction, in that, any other being is created. God is not, right? And I guess where I would kind of like to take this a little bit, if we can, and I don't know if we're actually going to pivot onto the other topic or not at this point, but when you get into like John 1, right? I don't actually know this well enough, so I'm curious what you've looked at, David, on like verse 1 or verse 3. So John 1:3, right? All things came into being through him, and apart from him, not one thing came into being that has come into being. In the way that people thought about things in the first century, written in Greek, what would that have meant to people? Is it the same thing that the ancient Near Eastern people would have thought, where it's just ordering matter, or is this actually talking about creating?
I don't think so either.
All of reality, bro. Logos is all of reality.
And I actually see that as someone who leans functional view, but can really go either way at this point.
Yeah.
I would think John, as the author, is trying to mirror Genesis to explain the preexistence of the Son as a distinct person from the Father. Just like 1 Corinthians 8:6 from Paul is a New Testament exegesis of Deuteronomy 6 and 4.
And the incarnation is just as important as the creation event.
Yes,
absolutely.
I actually think that the creation was made for the purpose of the incarnation.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're a Calvinist, maybe. No, I'm just joking. No. You're not a Calvinist.
No, but
he's not
seriously,
a Calvinist either. So I can say that to him.
And when I say the incarnation, there, I mean two things. I actually mean the pre-incarnate Son becoming incarnate through the Holy Spirit in the Virgin Mary's womb and then walking on earth. I also mean the incarnation of Christ in the body of Christ in the church. I think that was the telos to which God was aiming when he created things, and that Christ coming in the flesh enabled that original design to happen. That is the God who declares the end from the beginning, bringing about the end, the telos that he created things for. But
Okay.
you know, maybe I'm getting out over my skis a little bit on that one.
I've got the audience questions teed up. I know that's what
Okay.
we're following alongside and getting ready
Yeah,
for. Actually, all of these questions from Blake Hosler. Blake, I invited to watch this. So he's actually one of my better friends, but I actually brought him into Calvinism, but he's still a pretty dedicated
You
younger
sinner!
creation.
You just
I know.
ruined someone's soul.
Welcome,
I know.
Blake. And I'm so sorry, guys, for the technical difficulties on my end.
It's
like
okay.
it ain't.
Oh man, we've
normally
just
like
been on
this.
cruise control. No worries.
I appreciate
It's fine.
it.
We've just been having fun, man. I've had a lot of fun just airing this out, you know, because
Right on.
it's there's a lot to it, you know.
From what I've heard, it sounds fruitful, and it sounds like this is exactly the direction I was wanting to go in. So great job. So Blake, he says, my main question is why, when God created light, could that not be the stars and the radiations that date the earth? Then in verse 5, he established time.
I think that once you get, and I'm sorry, maybe I just jumped the gun there, but okay. So
I had switched over to John
so-
1, and I'm reading in the verses, and I'm like, that's not what I'm looking for.
Okay. So for Blake, I would say, brother, that once God starts creating a sequence of events, okay, so if God said, let there be light, okay, and that was the Big Bang, okay, that was all physical reality. If God said, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, that's all physical reality. Part of your question is, I think that is the sun, moon, and stars. I think everything was in place. I think that there's a perspective change, right? I think that God goes from the heavens as looking down from creation, right, to inside the earth looking out towards creation. Okay, so I look at
I've been trying to wrap my head around that switch and trying to do it the way that I think you're thinking of it, and I think I get it now.
I think Hugh Ross describes it way better than I. But so what I do is as I'm looking out towards creation, I see that God takes that primordial atmosphere, okay, and takes it from totally dark, as Job describes in Job 38 and 39, that there's a thick band of darkness that surrounded the earth. For the fact that we know that primordial earth had an atmosphere, I think it was something like 9 times thicker than that of Venus's. So no light could get in. So there would be no osmosis. There'd be nothing, right? So when we see that God turned this atmosphere from totally dark to a translucent, to where it would be opaque, like a permanent overcast. Now you can have light come through, and now there's osmosis, which we see that life begins on day one. We see those animals start to just pop, you know, that God starts, or some sort of bacteria or something. But that's where that it establishes that. But I think time exists from when he says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Time exists at the initial point of the Big Bang. Time, space, and matter. Gravity, all that. Boom. It comes into existence right when he says, in the beginning, God. And whenever he speaks the world into existence, whenever he speaks, or the universe into existence, that's when time exists as well. And that's what we see with science. We see that time came into existence at the Big Bang. We see that time, gravity came into existence at the Big Bang. We see that all the initial conditions that set us up for life we have now come into existence at that singular point. And we have incredible evidence that points back to it. I'll give it to Josh. Sorry, I took so long.
Oh, that's great. No, I'm just trying to absorb what you're saying and make sure am I muted?
No, you're good. I hear you.
Okay. Weird. I don't know. Yeah, I'm just trying to absorb that, because I think I caught some things this time around that I didn't the first and second time you were talking about that perspective shift. So I think that's helpful. The reason I was asking about John is, I guess what I see there, I think, and again, still learning, it seems like in John 1, John is talking about God creating everything through the Logos.
Oh
right?
yeah. Mhm.
And so when I see that, and then I look back at Genesis and I think about the different things that I have heard different scholars talk about there, I feel like we get creation ex nihilo without necessarily needing it in Genesis 1. And so I guess that's maybe why I'm asking the question, but obviously you have a lot of positive reasons for seeing creation ex nihilo in Genesis 1 as well, and you've been talking about that, and it's very interesting for sure.
Andrew, do you want to comment on that?
I would piggyback off of David's answer. I don't believe God's going to sequentially start creation pieces in eternity, and then by the time he creates light, that's when time comes into play. I think I understand. Maybe they're trying to do that in a sense of saying the Big Bang was the start of space, time, and matter. But I believe God created time, and then all of these things happened as a result. I don't think he eternally created light in the first few days of things, because then you have to trivialize what the first day, the second day was, until you get to verse 5, or until you get to the creation of light.
Let me jump in real quick, and this is maybe a way to help people understand it. Okay, what we call this is what we call simultaneous creation. Okay, it's kind of like the idea that a lamp or a chandelier is at the same time hanging from the lights are hanging from a chain that's hanging from an anchor in the wall. Now all of them are dependent upon each other at one time. They're simultaneously working together to be what they are, and that's how
to
God.
function as a lamp.
Well, yeah, yeah.
Sorry,
in a
I had to
way,
get that.
but
Yeah.
no, you're right, and this is where I would see your point here. However, when it comes to, I mean, we're far removed from Genesis when we're talking about that billionth of a second, right? We're talking about that second before the Big Bang. That well, not even a second; it's a billionth of a second. We're talking about that time God just puts it all together at once when He speaks, and it's as fast as me saying this. It's as fast as me speaking a word. God says, it's amazing.
Mhm.
It's glorious. It's something that deserves worship. It's the first miracle. So yeah.
Right on. Good answers, guys. Good answers. All right. Blake says, appreciate the answer. As a follow up, why next then would we need time to be what allows the light time to travel rather than the light already in its normal streams upon being created? Don't all jump at it at once.
I'm trying to
We're trying to
understand. Is this a
understand.
question
Yeah,
of the speed of light? Is he questioning the speed of light as the standard to measure the time from which the universe was created?
Right.
Because I've talked to Blake independently before, and he actually has some interesting views to make young Earth work that would suggest that over time the speed of light changed, and as a result, that's why the Earth could be 10,000 years old.
Yeah.
So I think that's the question he's wanting to tackle. He's coming at this from a younger perspective.
Man, I'm glad you can interpret that, because I
Well, that's his friend. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
And that's the beauty of relationships, man. Great job,
kind of
Andrew.
like Josh and I,
I might still be straw manning him unintentionally. I don't know.
Well, let me ask you guys this then, because Aaron Clark, I don't know if
let me answer him. I do think that there is a case for time dilation. I don't think that God needs thousands of years. I don't think any of us would agree that God needs thousands of years or billions of years or whatever we think the earth is. But here's my perspective. If he did it in that time, if that's how he ordered creation, that's how he did it. He knows what's best. He knows how to do that. He knows what is best to make a world in which that dinosaurs lived and became extinct to better enhance the lives of the apple of his eye. So yeah, I would see. I understand. I get where you're coming from. But go ahead, Tyler. Go
Well,
ahead.
I was just going to ask, God creating with the appearance of age. That's a thing that I've heard, that I've used. And so with because that kind of threw me. Are you guys young Earth creationists or old Earth, or
I'm old Earth.
You're old
I'm
Earth. Old Josh.
I'd lean old, but I honestly don't care
know.
as much, which is part of why, like, when David gets into the details on the science, I'm like, this is really fascinating, because I live so much kind of in the biblical text side of things that I just haven't opened up that.
Wait, so you affirm Big Bang cosmology. So you're saying that our universe could be 13.8 billion years old, but the Earth might still only be 10,000 years old?
No, I think that.
No, not David. I'm saying Joshua. Yeah. I know you're old Earth all the way.
I don't know.
That's actually a really comfortable answer.
Yeah.
I got to get better at saying I don't know.
I mean, but seriously, like, I find it. I think it would be interesting for the Earth to be young, and for so many things to appear the way that we look at them, as if they're much, much older. And that's why I tend to generally kind of lean old Earth. But I also, again, it's like, I have not sensed personally that my faith is dependent on figuring out the answer to that question.
You're right.
So it's just not somewhere I've gone.
So then here's my question then to that follow-up. Could God create with the appearance of age?
No.
No way.
Because he would be being deceptive. Why would he deceive us into making something
God
look older than
Adam
it
as a baby, like and he grew up, and then that's when
we take. There's no appearance of age in Adam. There's no appearance of anything. He just created him. He specially created him.
But
why would I have to?
My point though is, whenever God created Adam, he created a man, right? We're going to assume
he created the man. Yeah, mitochondrially. Eve and mitochondrial Adam. Yeah, absolutely.
What does that mean?
That means that they're the first two.
Forgive me.
And mitochondrial really doesn't apply to a man, but
they're right. That's what I was like.
But what I was just trying to convey, they were the two humans. But no, I don't think so. If God says, okay, this is where it starts, this is the starting point. I specially created Adam.
Mm-hmm.
I especially created Eve, and this is how it runs afterwards. This is what will happen afterwards in the series of events that he describes. Then that's how it goes. I don't think he has to deceive us and say, okay, now I'm gonna make Adam and Eve. But
why would that be deceptive though? That's what I guess I'm not understanding. If God created with the appearance of age, and
because we have two books, right? We have a book of nature and we have a book of Revelation. Right? We have a book of nature that tells us that the earth is billions of years old. We have an overwhelming amount of evidence to tell us that it's 4.6 billion years old. We have incredible evidence that we can't shake off that says that the universe is 13.6 billion years old, right? Or 13.6 to 8, whatever it is, right? We have incredible evidence. Right? Mm-hmm. That says that. So, yeah, if God is going to say, okay, this is what I'm going to show you, and this is what it's like, and this is how from mathematical truth that we get in every other area of life, this is how it is. You know what I mean?
I don't know.
Are you getting it?
I don't. I mean, maybe not.
Why would he deceive us in saying, okay, I'm going to make this look older than it actually is?
But my question is, there's so much evidence to the contrary. Why are there still young Earth creationists? Like, what are they holding on to?
Because they're wrong.
Well, why are there still Mormons? I mean, why are there still Muslims?
Right. I get that.
Why are there still Armenians? I'm just kidding.
There we go. Let's bring it back to a point.
I'm done for the night. I promise.
You got a good one. I got to give you that one. But
hearts are hardened, right? So, anyway, fair enough.
Oh man, don't get me started on Ezekiel. I think the reformed usage of that is off the charts. But that's okay.
It is, but Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Don't let's not
Well-
go, let's not go that route.
Here's the thing. I'm
That's
like I
good.
said,
That's a
I'm
whole nother hour and a half long
Oh man,
Yeah.
discussion.
I-
But no, as far as God does not need to look. Either you're gonna read the evidence in two ways. Okay,
Mhm.
you're gonna read the evidence and deny the validity of it, or you're gonna read it and accept the validity of it.
Mhm.
It's up to you, man.
So
Like what I say at PRA all the time.
yeah.
The choice is yours.
I gotta get those variables. Like I haven't examined them. You know what I mean? I guess that's where I'm coming from because I haven't focused on this. I've been on soteriology, I've been on eschatology, hell, and all these different things. So this is I've got a lot of questions, right? Because I've got that traditional kind of young earth thing.
Do we got
You
any more
know, that I'm
audience
stuck to.
questions?
Yeah, well, kind of, sort of, not really, but I want to address it. So yes.
Go ahead.
So Aaron Clark, I don't know, I don't know if you've seen him. Have you guys looked at these comments? But he's got an
I can't
issue.
look at them.
Okay, well, he's got an
Well,
issue
maybe I
with
can.
using science. So how many base what you believe has to do with science? Because I've heard you bring it up. That
Oh, okay. Can I take that one?
please.
Yeah, please do.
Do you want me to
Okay.
go through all the comments?
Because
or
you
do
don't
I
want
just-
me to.
Okay.
So back up a comment here.
Oh, sorry.
When we get into the faith and evidence thing,
That one.
yeah.
Okay.
Personally, and people here might see this differently, but I think it's a mistake to look at faith as opposed to evidence. I think what we see with the way the Bible talks about faith is that faith is trust in a particular being. It's trust in God. It's trust in what he says. It's trust that he is faithful. It's trust that he is good and holy and right. And any assurance that we have in salvation is based on the fact that we trust what God says. Because if we don't, then the Bible means nothing to us. Right? So I think when we pit faith against evidence, we're actually making a category mistake, because faith isn't just about mental assent. It's not just about believing certain things. It's about actually trusting in a person, a being, in God, and believing that he's faithful. And it's not just about that. It's also about then taking risk, right? Because a faith that actually trusts in somebody, true trust, is trust that can take risk. It's trust that because God is sovereign, because he Jesus is king, that means there's allegiance involved, and pistis can mean that too, right? It means there's faithfulness involved, both God's and ours, to whatever extent we can do that by the power of the Holy Spirit, right? So I honestly just part of the reason that this whole faith and science thing, like when David goes into all the science stuff, I stop talking because it's not stuff I know as much about. But I don't see it as pitted against, because God is the one who created. And therefore, if we can trust who he is and what he said, and we can trust that the world around us is real, I don't see a conflict.
This is what I want to say about that. This is the
Yeah.
bad fruit of the American evangelical. We have to have faith. And most
Yes.
people who are saying the word faith don't understand what pistis or fiducia or saving faith really is as compared to mental assent. They pit
Yes.
it against evidence. Jesus is an evidence-giving God. When John the Baptist sent his disciples when he's in prison and to ask Jesus, are you the one that we've been waiting for, or should we wait for someone else? Jesus follows it up with, well, he just is looking for too much evidence. He doesn't have any faith in me anymore. He said, no, go and tell John, the man who baptized me heard my Father's voice, saw the Spirit descend on my shoulder like a dove. Tell him that the blind are made to see, the lame walk, the deaf hear, the dead are raised. He presented evidence to remind John of why he was the Messiah.
And we don't see.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
then we see Lazarus raised from the dead, and I don't think what's more evidential than that.
Well, and we
then
don't see
find his
this
grave
sense.
about 800 years later, and that's crazy. But
We don't
anyways.
see the angel at the tomb that tells the women that come to the tomb, he's risen. You'll just have to trust me.
That's true.
Like,
Don't
You're right.
give any evidence. Actually,
Right.
just don't tell
Obviously,
anybody.
we're in that position, but let's place our position in reality here for a second. if we want to say that we need to have faith in order to trust in any kind of a secondary, evidence of things, then and we're basically saying that science is the only way we can know things, then history is out the window. Because we cannot repeat history. We cannot observe it and repeat it. That's not science. Right. So when we're talking about knowledge, when we're talking about this, we're talking about episteme, we're talking about doxa, we're talking about techne, these different concepts of knowledge that you have in Greek thought, and you go back further, ancient Near Eastern thought, but I'm not as familiar with those words. But you definitely have this sense that there are different kinds of knowledge, there are different things that we can understand, and that we don't see this idea that's pitted between faith and evidence in Scripture in the same way. I just don't see it. Okay, that was a hobby horse for me.
That was good.
I rode that one. I haven't yet.
No, I haven't either. I'm not sure. No,
and hi Vanessa, by the way.
Hi Vanessa. All right. Nope.
Shoot, I guess we won't have much to say on that. Is there anything anyone else wants to say about Craig in general?
I do want to say anything about the history of epics, and I didn't bring this up before, but if we look at epics in other ancient Near Eastern literature, we see ahistorical events, right?
Yeah.
We see that these heroes are representatives, right? But in Genesis, we see real people in real-time events, and I think that's consistent, and I think that's what makes a view that's not just the functional view, because we agreed that there obviously is elements of that in there. And I don't know where you stand totally on that now, since we've been talking.
More so than when we started, but who knows what that means, right? Let me climb inside your mind.
Right. But there are these elements of narrative that treat, like if you look at Gilgamesh is a representative of the experiences of human beings and all of mankind almost. It's not just a real guy, like you see Abraham or you see Noah or something like that. They're not just these figurative people. Gilgamesh is, and I think that's really interesting too. That goes along to say that this revelation, God puts this stuff in reality, versus if you look at just the functional view, it's kind of just allegorical. Now, I'm not denying there's allegory in Genesis at all. Obviously I think there is, but not to the full extent. But then again, that also goes to say that, if it's taken to the extreme, that's where I think people go wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the extreme where it gets interesting. I personally, when I look at Genesis, I actually see both. I do think Adam and Eve actually existed. I think that there's a reason that Paul can say from one man God created all nations on the earth. I think that plays into a lot of what we see when we talk about humanity and our need for a savior and all of that. But I also think what we see in Genesis, because we're talking about the beginning of all things, and what are you doing, Tyler? You are messing with me.
I really want to get to something on this comment, but go ahead. I'm not trying to interrupt. I'm just trying to be funny.
You're just trying to speed me up.
I do want to get to something on this.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what we see in Genesis, because we're talking about the archetypal people, is a lot of archetypal stuff that is in a way representative of all humanity. So when Adam and Eve are told this is what life is going to be like because you rebelled, and they're being kicked out of the garden, they're told, you're going to be mortal, right? Hey, look, we're mortal too, right? So Genesis is giving us an understanding of why are we mortal? What happened? How did we get here? Right? It's also giving us an understanding of scarcity, that you're going to have to toil in the ground in order to actually bring food forth from it. And when you start thinking about scarcity, what does that bring forth? now you have people fighting over things because there are scarce resources, right? If they're going to try to actually survive, they either need to get the resources from the ground or they take them from other people. That brings dominant hierarchies. And that's one of the things that we actually see brought forth with Adam and Eve is now your desire will be for your husband, he will rule over you. So I do think we see an etiological aspect of Genesis that's telling us archetypally, this is life experience for us. This is how we got here. This is why these things are the way they are. But I think the difference is this isn't just a story. This is also history. So I actually see both, which is partly why I'm probably frustrating.
You agree with me, but you don't agree with me.
Right. I am a whole Venn diagram.
Is that that's accepted though, right? Like you can do that though. You can see it as history and as something else. I mean, it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both and just like so many other things.
I think it depends on kind of how you put it together.
Too, and like we were talking about earlier, I think one of the things that we cleared first off, and it may have got lost, was that there is some functionality to it, but there's also some history too. We have to see Genesis also as historical. I don't think we can see it as just that functioning view. If we do, I think we're way in the weeds.
I'm not even sure the functional view entails that you have to believe it.
I don't think so either.
But
you got the mytho history guys, and then there's so many different views here.
Yeah,
I'm tackling it from my perspective of what I've heard and seen from all three different perspectives, or all four, really. And I'm trying to put it together the best way I can. Part of me coming on tonight is also working this out because I don't know fully,
right.
And this is
me too, man.
This is what I tell my Calvinist friends too, is that like I don't harp on Calvinists. I don't harp on the Arminian issue. I don't make a hard stand either way, even though I'm a Molinist, that leans towards Arminianism. I still look at every other view and I want to find the deepest research on it, on both of them, before I totally take a stand. Because if I take a stand one way,
props on that, bro.
If I take a stand one way, I could be isolating somebody in another way. I could be a stumbling block, and I don't want to be a stumbling block.
Well, I sure think we don't want to be taking a stand in the sense that we are putting people, off, right? Oh man, but that point of when Paul is talking about it, he's like, man, I'm glad I didn't baptize anybody. Well, maybe this guy, but and the reason he says that is he has people that are saying I'm of Paul and I'm of Apollos, and he's like, no, we're all of Christ. Like, so yeah, absolutely. I mean, we can take a stand on issues that we feel strongly about, but it's always within that framework of who are you allegiant to? If you are allegiant to Christ, if you are following Christ, if he is your savior and your God, I'm with you.
That's right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Amen. Last audience question we have is the one I was flashing earlier. I just want to comment, since I haven't commented on a comment. I just want to comment on this one. No, Vanessa, at least Andrew and I disagree with you. It did not happen by chance. It happened exactly as it was predestined to do. So please repent and join the Calvi Club.
Yeah, just make sure to thank Chance, a non-existent.
Because Andrew's here tonight.
I am.
Man,
it's nice not to
He's
have
like,
a 3-on-1.
We Calvinists are so vilified for trying to be biblically consistent.
Which you're not, which is okay. I still love you.
Oh man,
all right,
we're winning this round,
good,
David.
Man. I'm good. I'm good.
All right, so here's the thing. We've gone for hour 48.
Yeah,
I've loved it. Do we want to spend the last 10 minutes, because I do got to start wrapping this up?
Yeah.
Do we want to spend the last 10 minutes on Ghosts and Ghouls, or do we want to?
I think you should make a whole episode on Ghosts and Ghouls.
I think we should too. So let's do a part 3, Ghosts and Ghouls.
I'll be there.
We down for that? All right. So so let me ask you guys this then, all in all. And actually one more thing. Josh Davidson brought up a really good question. I want to get your all's opinion on it. He said that if you let me pull it up. Actually, I had to restart my computer, so never mind, I don't have it. But basically, if you deny creation ex nihilo, you have a real problem with the Kalam cosmological argument. And I don't know, I don't want to really kind of dive into that. I mean, we can if you guys want to, but is that there truth behind that? Because I'm not
I think
familiar
we'd
with
all
it.
agree with that if we're
Okay.
looking at it from a strictly scientific standpoint. And I think I could speak for the other guys. We'd have a problem with that. But I don't think from the outset that we deny Creatio ex nihilo. We're just asking where is it stronger in the Bible at? I say Genesis 1, the full functionalists. I can't speak for Andrew or Josh because they're not full functionalists. They lean towards that.
Right.
Okay. But as a full functionalist, you're going to say it's somewhere else, right? That's why I asked the question very early on: is it in Nehemiah? Is it in Psalms? Is it in Hebrews? And that's why I don't think we can get a strong one. But I think if we look at the Hebrew and we look at the placement and the tradition that we've had since before modern scholarship, I mean, we can see the battles. And I think that's the strength of the socio-historical argument is if we look at the battles our Christian brothers and the Hebrews fought against the pagan cultures with, we can see that they were putting forth a God that existed before matter, before time, before space. And I don't think we can separate that from Genesis because I think it's included. But that's just my point of view.
Josh, what are your thoughts?
Oh, man, this has been good.
It has.
I think I've learned some things from David. I've learned some things from Andrew. Glad to meet Andrew and become acquainted.
Yeah, likewise.
Also glad to meet David, but met him before, so I was like, maybe I shouldn't just skip past that.
Tyler
yes, we already know each other.
Andrew before,
right? Yeah,
he was on the open mic night with us.
Nice.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Nice to kind of formally meet you then. So, put a face with a name.
I remember you. You don't remember me?
I don't, man. Like,
it
sorry.
was back in August, though.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Oh my gosh, it was like back in June. So
was it?
I was
June?
in the hospital in August. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Why
Right, man.
My apologies, man. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
But Andrew, let me ask you this: and what are your thoughts, like, on everything? Like, first of all, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it, brother. But what are your kind of closing remarks on everything that we've talked about tonight, first episode and now?
I'm grateful to have been included, given the apparent gap in knowledge. And that's why I take the easy way out and say I could be swayed in either direction on this. But the functional view that I've read from Heiser and Walton, that's the most recent thing I stumbled upon. And I took it from this premise of I really just want to know what the Bible said, because my younger brothers that I contend with against, I think Answers in Genesis has the same inconsistency. In anything else, when it comes to proving the Trinity, justification by faith alone, any other part of the Old Testament, they run to be these exegetical superheroes and try to hermeneutically understand the culture and the time these things were being written. But when it comes to the creation account, we can just take the plain English reading of the text. Like, come on, just go the whole way. Apply the same standards you are for the Trinity and anything else to the creation myth. And understanding that bara and tovu babahu have meanings that I've never understood. And then when I understood the aspect of it, it's actually a polemic against surrounding cultures and their creation myths to show Yahweh is superior, then the question really comes down to the two sides. Is it superior but similar in terms of using pre-existing material, or is it entirely unique? And in the beginning, or when God began creating, that's how you actually have to read it in Hebrew, is that the origin point of the universe and the Big Bang? I saw a strong argument for both. I can say, to Joshua and David's credit, I don't think either one of you just absolutely destroyed one another. And I kind of was hoping for that, so it would have been easier for me to come to a decision on. But I've had nothing but a good time. And then to the last question, denying Creatio ex nihilo, doesn't that pose problems for the cosmological argument? I mean, absolutely. If everything that begins to exist has a cause, and the universe didn't begin to exist because it's eternal, then it doesn't have a cause, and then you're right back to pantheism or panentheism. So
Right.
I don't. If someone ever tries to wed the two ideas, please let me be a big fly on the wall when you guys refute that dude for an hour and a half.
Yeah, for real. For real. All right.
But no, it's
gentlemen.
been an amazing time. Joshua, it's been good listening to you and getting acquainted. Tyler, it's, again, I remember you. You don't remember me. I'll forgive you for that. I guess God predestined that as his way of having a sense of humor.
Yeah.
And David, you're just David, bro. I love you, man. And thanks for including me.
Absolutely, man. And again, I'm thankful for all of you guys. David, send me a link to the debate. So that's tomorrow, correct?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. And where can people check that out at?
PRA.
Okay. YouTube, Facebook, anywhere else?
YouTube or Facebook, Twitch. I don't care.
Plug, man. Here's your opportunity.
That's
Plug
it, bro.
All right.
Twitch. No, we are live on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook.
Okay. Josh, tending our nets.
Yes, sir.
Where? Plug it, bro.
Oh, plug it. Okay. YouTube, podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, Tending Our Nets. If you want to look at 5 to 10 minute episodes on the gospel, just looking at different aspects that we don't often talk about in church that are actually very, very much part of what the good news actually is, who the good news is about, who it's for, and all of that.
Amen. And Andrew does apologetics. Plug it, brother.
TikTok.
That is basically it. And then
I love that you're doing that on TikTok, by the way.
Yeah, dude.
That's awesome.
So I came on with the idea I had another ex-Oneness Pentecostal that I became fast friends with. I just came on and then I posted one video and it blew up and the rest is history. So
Sweet.
Just pray that I'll get the mental tenacity to want to make content again. I haven't made a video in over 2 months, but most of that again was due to having COVID. But I've appeared on a few podcasts to talk about my journey out of the Oneness Pentecostal movement and how it's just as much of a dangerous cult as, say, Mormons or Jehovah's Witnesses. It's just more hidden in plain sight because they use that Pentecostal denominational stance to look like they're part of the mainstream church. We affirm Assemblies of God, Church of God, Trinitarian Pentecostals as our brothers and sisters in Christ for the most part. And they try to say, oh, well, I'm brothers and sisters with them, even though we get the Godhead and all of salvation wrong. And then that's how they slip in and look like they're our brothers and sisters, or they're part of the visible church when they're not. So just a little bit of that. Thanks for letting me plug that.
I'd love to talk with you about some of that stuff because I've been seeing more and more of the Unitarian kind of resurgence and Oneness Pentecostalism and Jehovah's Witnesses and just different people that deny the Trinity. I remember there were a couple of years ago when on the Naked Bible podcast discussion page on Facebook, Heiser made a comment about people that are consistent Unitarians, and then it was just flooded.
Yeah.
And it was epic. And it pretty much just took down that page because they've actually shifted to a new page and been a little more tight about who gets in to try to keep that kind of stuff from happening. And the Naked Bible podcast page itself is now a little bit more of an open forum for people to kind of go a little nutty. And it really opened my eyes to wow, I know there's people out there, but wow. Okay. So yeah, I'd love to talk about that with you more.
I just got your friend request on Facebook, so let's set something up if you want, and I'll talk about it as long as you want. But
awesome,
David.
Yeah, I tried to get you. Been trying to get you a debate with a Oneness, but it seems to keep falling.
I got to work on that too. I have not reached out to anyone from UPC or ALJC yet, but I will.
Do it, man. See if we can't get something, and I'll host you. I'd love it. But again, Tyler must be having issues, so I think I'll let Josh Sherman, who's been playing co-host tonight, to close us out.
All right. Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Definitely just enjoyed learning and debating and throwing things back and forth and just kind of seeing what sticks to the wall and what falls off and all that. Grateful for you and for the Word of God that we have that we can dive into together to try to discern the truth and to try to better serve our God and everyone around us. So thank you and good night, everybody.